At the edge of space, Earth turns in silence. Dawn spreads slowly across its surface, brushing oceans with silver light and setting the highest clouds aglow in soft gold. From this distance, the planet appears calm, almost deliberate, as if suspended in a careful balance. The oceans rise and fall in patient rhythm. Winds spiral in wide, measured arcs. Continents rest beneath an atmosphere, neither too thin nor too heavy, wrapped in a magnetic field that shields against invisible storms from the sun. Everything seems positioned with quiet precision. It is easy to admire this harmony. Earth orbits at a distance that allows water to remain liquid, not frozen solid, not boiled away. Its tilt creates seasons that nurture cycles of growth. Its gravity holds air close, yet not so tightly that breath becomes a burden. Day fades into night with dependable timing. The sky reveals distant stars without exposing the surface to relentless radiation. Conditions overlap just enough to permit forests, oceans, lungs, and beating hearts. Science describes this balance in careful terms, but even without terminology, the pattern feels striking. Countless variables align within narrow margins, shift them slightly, and life as we know it dissolves. Increase solar intensity a fraction, and oceans thin into vapor. Reduce atmospheric protection, and radiation reshapes biology beyond recognition. Alter gravitational pull, and structure itself behaves differently. Yet here, on this particular world, the margins hold. Still, admiration gives way to a subtler feeling. Balance does not mean gentleness. Beneath those clouds, tectonic plates grind against one another. Volcanoes gather pressure in dark chambers below the crust. Storm systems form over warm waters and travel across coastlines with indifference to human intention. Life thrives, but only within limits. Species rise, adapt, and vanish. Extinction events ripple across epochs, clearing space for forms not yet imagined. The planet sustains life, yet it does not guarantee comfort. There is a tension woven into this design. Earth is fertile, yet restless. It provides resources, yet withholds ease. The very systems that protect also constrain. Gravity anchors every step. Weather demands preparation. Disease evolves alongside immunity. Nothing survives here without responding to pressure. Even beauty carries edge. Coral reefs depend on precise temperatures. Forests require cycles of decay, and mountains exist because of collision. Perhaps that is the quiet paradox. The conditions that allow life are exact, but the environment life enters is demanding. It is as if the world has been tuned not simply to host organisms, but to test them. The margins are narrow, yet within them, challenge is constant. Strength grows under strain. Intelligence sharpens through uncertainty. Cooperation forms in response to scarcity. Remove the pressure, and growth slows. Remove resistance, and adaptation fades. If Earth were meant to be entirely safe, why would survival require effort? Why would flourishing depend on navigation of risk? The planet does not cradle without consequence. It invites, then insists. As the sun rises fully, cities brighten and forests awaken. From orbit, the world still appears serene. Yet beneath that surface lies a structure built on precision and tension at once. The alignment is undeniable, but so is the demand placed upon every living thing that enters the system. The question lingers quietly, like mist over the ocean. Is this balance designed for comfort, or calibrated for something more? The camera falls slowly from orbit, descending through drifting clouds toward forests, breathing in morning light. From above, the world seemed balanced. From here, it feels restless. A seed splits underground, pushing against packed soil with silent insistence. Roots press downward in darkness before leaves ever taste the sun. Nothing begins in ease. Even the first motion of life is an act of pressure against resistance. Across the savannah, a predator waits with patient focus. Survival is not granted. It is negotiated. Prey runs because it must. Hunters sharpen instinct because hunger demands it. In deserts, sparse plants stretch toward rare rain. In frozen valleys, creatures grow thick fur and move with careful economy. Life does not drift casually into abundance. It adapts or it disappears. Cities mirror the same rhythm. Towers rise from steel drawn out of stones. Bridges span rivers once thought impossible to cross. After storms flatten coastlines, hands rebuild. After wars fracture nations, systems reorganize. Progress rarely arrives in comfort. It emerges from tension, from limits pressing inward. Muscles tear and repair, growing stronger than before. Minds confronted with uncertainty learn patterns and develop solutions. Civilizations tested by collapse often re-emerge refined, carrying hard lessons into a new era. Earth behaves less like a lounge and more like a field of trials. Gravity anchors every step, reminding bodies of weight. Scarcity sharpens cooperation. Where resources are limited, communities form strategies. Weather disrupts routine, forcing preparation and foresight. Even language evolved through necessity, a tool shaped by challenges faced together. Nothing here arrives without friction. Ease dulls instinct, resistance awakens it. It would be simple to call hardship a flaw, to assume the system could have been gentler. Yet nature seems structured around exposure rather than protection. Weak branches snap under wind. Fragile ecosystems collapse under imbalance. Choices echo through consequence. The planet does not shield error. It reveals it. Mistakes leave marks, sometimes deep ones. A poor harvest leads to hunger. A reckless invention leads to unintended harm. Earth does not interfere to prevent every fall. It allows gravity to teach. The pattern repeats across scales. In psychology, resilience grows from adversity faced and integrated. In biology, species evolve through environmental pressure, not abundance alone. In history, innovation surges after constraint forces imagination to widen. Time and again, tension becomes catalyst. The environment does not eliminate weakness. It brings it into view, where it must be addressed or endured. Seen this way, Earth feels less like a finished sanctuary and more like an arena. The soil welcomes seeds, but only those that push upward reach light. Oceans teem with life, yet only those adapted to currents survive. Human societies flourish, yet stagnation invites decline. Comfort, when it appears, is temporary. Stability is earned, maintained through vigilance and adjustment. The quiet suspicion deepens. Perhaps the struggle is not incidental. Perhaps it is central. Remove the resistance, and growth loses shape. Remove the challenge, and potential remains dormant. What if the environment itself is structured to reveal strength, expose vulnerability, and refine response? The forests rustle, the cities hum, the deserts stretch under burning sky. Everywhere, effort defines existence. If struggle is woven into every layer of this world, then the question shifts gently but unmistakably. Not whether hardship exists, but why it is so consistently necessary. And who, if anyone, benefits from a planet built on resistance. Long before telescopes mapped the heavens, or satellites traced the curve of the Earth, humanity told stories. Not casual tales to pass the night, but narratives heavy with warning, promise, and consequence. Around desert fires, beneath jungle canopies, along riverbanks where cities first rose, people spoke of trials, of exile from lost gardens, of floods that cleansed corruption, of heroes sent into wilderness, only to return transformed. Across continents that never touched, similar themes took root. Life was described as a proving ground. Actions were weighed. Choices carried unseen significance. The world was not always presented as a permanent dwelling, but as a passage, a realm between what was and what might come after. Souls were refined here. Hearts were measured here. Wisdom was earned through ordeal. These parallels are easy to dismiss as coincidence or imagination shaped by shared survival pressures. Yet the repetition lingers. Independent cultures, separated by oceans and centuries, framed existence in strikingly similar ways. Struggle was not random suffering. It was initiation. It was transformation. The narration does not claim divine instruction behind these patterns. Instead, it pauses on a quieter possibility. Early humans lived exposed to storms, famine, predators, and the raw rhythm of nature. They watched crops fail and return. They saw rivers overflow and retreat. They buried loved ones and faced the limits of breath. Perhaps, in that proximity to unfiltered reality, they sensed something that later comfort would soften. To live without insulation is to feel pressure more clearly. Every drought teaches fragility. Every harvest teaches renewal. Every victory demands endurance first. When survival itself feels like examination, it becomes natural to describe the world in that language. Life as test. Earth as stage. Existence as preparation. The camera drifts over ruined temples at dusk. Stone columns worn smooth by time. Foundations swallowed by roots. Civilizations flourished here, once, certain of permanence. They built monuments to their gods, to their victories, to their understanding of the cosmos. Then something shifted. Drought, invasion, internal decay. The cities thinned. The statues cracked, and yet, generations later, new societies rose on the same soil, carrying fragments of older stories forward. Rise, fall. Rise again. The repetition feels almost measured. Each era believes it's reached the peak, only to discover fragility woven into its height. Memory fades. Structures crumble. Lessons partially endure. It resembles not a straight path toward comfort, but a sequence of trials, each revealing strengths and exposing weaknesses. What if these myths were not naive attempts to explain fear, but intuitive reflections of environment? Not divine whispers, but human recognition that this world does not cradle endlessly. It confronts. It demands. It shapes through pressure. Perhaps ancient minds sensed the crucible more clearly than we do now, wrapped in modern convenience. As twilight settles over the ruins, one thought grows sharper. If so many early civilizations described life as examination, and if struggle seems built into the fabric of Earth itself, perhaps they were responding to something real, not a paradise lost, but a system in motion. The question rises, steady and unsettling. What if this world was never meant as a place to settle forever, but as a passage to move through? And if so, who designed the passage, and toward what end? Far beyond Earth's thin atmosphere, the planet appears serene, suspended in black silence. From this distance, it is easy to imagine alternatives. Suppose, just for a moment, that this world is not accidental. Suppose it is structured, not casually assembled, but deliberately configured. If that were true, what would such a design prioritize? Comfort without interruption, or growth shaped through limits? On Earth, existence arrives with boundaries attached. Lifespan is brief against the scale of mountains and oceans. No one remains indefinitely. Time narrows every decision, adding weight to choices that might otherwise drift. Knowledge is partial. Humans perceive only a narrow band of light, a small slice of sound. The future remains uncertain. Even the nature of consciousness and death stays unresolved. These are not minor oversights. They define the human condition. Emotional vulnerability threads through every life. Love deepens, meaning precisely because it can be lost. Trust becomes powerful because betrayal is possible. Courage only emerges where fear exists. If a world were intended to measure character, it would need such contrasts. Remove risk, and bravery becomes unnecessary. Remove scarcity, and generosity loses significance. Remove uncertainty, and integrity requires no effort. Earth withholds ultimate answers. It offers no public confirmation of purpose. No undeniable evidence appears in the sky to declare intention. Instead, ambiguity settles over existence, like a soft haze. People make decisions without complete knowledge. They act without guaranteed reward. They interpret signals that may or may not carry deeper meaning. In a perfectly transparent system, behavior would shift toward calculation. Here, it feels authentic because it is not externally verified. Natural disasters, disease, and randomness complicate the picture. At first glance, they resemble flaws in design. Yet they also destabilize stagnation. A world without disruption might drift into complacency. Species would remain fixed. Societies would grow rigid. Shock forces adaptation. Loss compels re-evaluation. Sudden change reveals resilience, or lack of it. This does not transform catastrophe into kindness. Pain remains pain. But within structural speculation, disruption functions as variable. A system designed to test cooperation must occasionally present shared threat. A world intended to refine creativity must impose limits that demand innovation. Constraint, in this sense, becomes architecture rather than error. Consider certainty. If every moral choice carried immediate visible consequence, behavior would be mechanical. People would act for reward, not conviction. Yet on Earth, outcomes are often delayed, unclear, or unevenly distributed. Some injustices go unpunished. Some kindnesses pass unnoticed. The system does not publicly score each act. It allows ambiguity to stretch across time. What if limitation itself is necessary? A world without death would lack urgency. A world without ignorance would eliminate discovery. A world without emotional exposure would erase empathy. Boundaries create tension, and tension generates movement. Seen from deep space again, Earth rotates with quiet indifference. Storms swirl, forests grow and burn. Humans build and question. If the planet's constraints resemble carefully chosen parameters rather than random inconveniences, a deeper possibility emerges. Perhaps the environment is not structured to maximize comfort, but to reveal character under pressure. If that is so, then another question waits just beyond it. Not only whether Earth appears designed through limitation, but whether the fabric of reality itself supports such a hypothesis. When physicists describe the universe, they do so with equations. Symbols arranged on a board somehow capture the motion of planets, the bending of light, the hidden dance of particles too small to see. Mathematics does not merely approximate reality. It maps it with unnerving precision. The same formulas apply whether carved into ancient parchment or rendered on modern screens. Numbers hold steady. Ratios persist. Constants refuse to drift. There is something quietly remarkable in that stability. Gravity behaves today as it did in distant centuries. Light travels at the same speed across vacuum, indifferent to observer or era. The structure beneath matter appears ordered, layered, almost logical. Reality does not unravel into chaos when examined closely. It reveals patterns. And yet, beneath that order, uncertainty flickers. At microscopic scales, particles resist full observation. They exist in states of probability, settling only when measured. Precision at large scales gives way to ambiguity in the small. The universe operates through rules, but not through rigid predictability. It allows surprise within structure. Information lies at the heart of it all. DNA coils inside cells as coded instructions, guiding growth and repair. A single strand carries a blueprint complex enough to shape eyes that see and minds that question. Physical laws display symmetry across space, as if written once and applied everywhere. Nothing feels random in the deepest sense. Even randomness follows distribution curves. The thought arises gently, without announcement. In digital worlds, vast environments operate through underlying code. Mountains appear solid, oceans stretch to horizons. Yet everything obeys programmed instruction. Characters within such systems perceive continuity without accessing the rules beneath. Boundaries often lie beyond their awareness. The world feels expansive, though parameters quietly define its edges. Human perception covers only a narrow spectrum. We see a sliver of light frequencies. We hear a limited range of sound. We sense only certain textures of energy. Instruments expand that window, revealing radio waves, infrared glow, distant gamma bursts. Still, each expansion shows that reality extends far beyond our ordinary reach. What if perception itself is constrained by design? What if the universe reveals only what is necessary for participation? In many structured systems, access depends on level. Complexity unfolds gradually. Too much information at once overwhelms the process. No extreme claims are needed. The accumulation of patterns speaks softly. A cosmos governed by stable constants. Microscopic behavior that depends on interaction. Information embedded in biology. Laws that resemble instructions rather than accidents. The universe behaves consistently, yet retains an element of unpredictability that keeps outcomes uncertain. Is this simply the nature of existence? Or does it hint at architecture? The idea remains suspended between science and speculation. Equations continue to describe. Telescopes continue to observe. The deeper we look, the more reality appears both precise and veiled. If the fabric of existence resembles rule-based structure, then the question shifts once more. Structure implies purpose, or at least direction. In any designed environment, rules serve an objective. And if reality operates through such rules, what exactly are they meant to accomplish? The view shifts from galaxies and equations back to something smaller and far more immediate, a hand reaching for another in the dark. A stranger offering help without expectation. A quiet decision made when no one is watching. If Earth was structured as a trial, the measurement would not be taken from orbit. It would be found here, in moments too subtle for satellites to record. Wealth fades. Fame drifts. Power changes hands with time. None of these endure. Yet certain responses leave marks deeper than monuments. Empathy offered under pressure. Honesty chosen when deceit would bring advantage. Forgiveness extended even when anger feels justified. These qualities rarely make headlines, yet they shape the atmosphere of every human life. Intelligence alone does not define the human story. Brilliant minds have built tools of healing and instruments of harm alike. Creativity can uplift or destroy. What matters is not capacity alone, but direction. When suffering appears, does response lean toward indifference or compassion? When loss strikes, does resilience take root? Or does bitterness spread? Under ambiguity, when outcomes remain hidden, does integrity remain intact? These are not external achievements. They are internal calibrations, invisible from space, but unmistakable within experience. If Earth measures anything, it may measure reaction rather than possession. The system does not prevent temptation. It does not eliminate injustice entirely. Instead, it creates conditions in which character becomes visible through choice. Scarcity reveals generosity. Uncertainty reveals trust. Conflict reveals restraint, or its absence. In many structured environments, evaluation occurs only after completion. Participants may not know the final score while engaged in the process. Immediate feedback would alter behavior, turning sincerity into strategy. Earth remains opaque regarding ultimate consequences. Actions do not always produce visible reward. Goodness can go unnoticed. Harm may escape instant correction. What if that silence is essential? If people knew beyond doubt that every moral choice was recorded and publicly judged, behavior might become calculated rather than authentic. Doubt preserves freedom. Uncertainty protects sincerity. The possibility settles softly. Perhaps the world is not examining performance, but authenticity. Not how impressively one acts under observation, but how one responds when the outcome remains uncertain. Imagine a scale sensitive, not to achievement, but to intention. Not to applause, but to quiet integrity. A system that weighs resilience after grief, courage amid fear, kindness in obscurity. If such a measure exists, it operates beneath spectacle. It would not appear in headlines or titles. It would be present in kitchens, hospital rooms, empty streets at night. In choices no one else fully sees. The larger question shifts almost unnoticed. It may not be whether Earth was engineered or assembled by chance. The deeper question around us invites awareness. Whether we are meant to sense the tension, the limits, the silence, and consider what they imply. If this world is a test, the part being evaluated may not be visible to anyone else. It may exist in private thought, quiet restraint, unseen courage. And if that is so, another possibility emerges. Perhaps the trial does not occur only within individual lives. Perhaps entire civilizations move through cycles of examination as well. Evening settles over broken columns and weathered stone. The wind moves gently through corridors once filled with voices, arguments, music, and ambition. Sand gathers in corners where merchants once traded. Vines coil around walls that once displayed banners of victory. Nothing announces catastrophe here. Only absence remains. It is difficult to imagine that these empty structures once pulsed with coordination and belief. Administrations governed from these chambers. Markets connected distant regions. Engineers designed roads that stitched continents together. Language flourished, art reached refinement. For a time, each civilization believed it had found stability. And then, something shifted. The pattern appears again and again, separated by geography and era. A culture rises near fertile water. It organizes agriculture, builds architecture, forms systems of law, innovation spreads. Population expands. Influence stretches outward. Complexity thickens like woven fabric. Trade networks widen. Wealth accumulates. For a moment, the structure seems secure. But expansion introduces strain. Food systems depend on delicate balance. Climate alters subtly. Resources thin. Trust inside institutions weakens. Leadership fragments. External pressure builds at the borders. Internal divisions spread quietly through the core. Confidence erodes. What once felt permanent begins to tremble. Collapse rarely announces itself dramatically at first. It seeps. Infrastructure decays under neglect. Communication falters. Authority loses coherence. And sometimes, astonishingly, the unraveling accelerates. Within decades, perhaps within a generation, a culture that seemed immovable dissolves into scattered memory. Libraries burn. Archives vanish. Roads crack and fall silent. Survivors adapt to smaller scales, carrying fragments of old knowledge into simpler lives. Something essential fails to transfer fully. Techniques are forgotten. Stories blur. Memory thins. The speed of disappearance is unsettling. For societies so complex, the dissolution can feel almost clean, not gentle but decisive. As if a system reached a threshold and then reset. It would be easy to attribute each decline solely to unique circumstances. Drought here, invasion there, economic mismanagement elsewhere. And yet the structural echoes repeat with familiar cadence. Expansion, strain, fragmentation. Silence. Why does progress so often peak just before it unravels? From a distance, history does not resemble a straight climb upward. It pulses. Growth, followed by contraction. Flourishing, followed by fracture. New civilizations rising atop the foundations of those that fell, often unaware of the full heights once achieved beneath their feet. The ruins at dusk hold no accusation. They simply stand as evidence that complexity is fragile. No empire, however vast, has proven immune. No system, however advanced, has escaped vulnerability. If Earth operates as an arena shaped by constraint, perhaps entire societies move through similar pressures as individuals do. Perhaps collective strength must be tested. Perhaps cohesion must prove itself under strain. And when imbalance grows too severe, recalibration occurs. The thought remains speculative, unspoken by stone, yet implied by repetition. Collapse may not only represent failure, it may represent correction, a clearing of overgrowth, a narrowing before new ascent. History, viewed from the quiet of ruins, feels less like endless progress and more like rhythm. A breath drawn in, held, released. If decline repeats with such consistency across centuries, the next question begins to form. Are these resets random misfortunes, or do they follow patterns? Rules hidden beneath the rise and fall of civilizations. The silence of ruins gives way to something more abstract. Lines appear across maps. Trade routes stretching between cities, shipping lanes, threading oceans, roads radiating outward from capitals. Populations rise in smooth curves. Harvest yields fluctuate. Temperatures shift. The imagery is no longer stone and shadow, but pattern and motion. Before collapse becomes visible, signals gather quietly. Population density thickens beyond what soil can comfortably sustain. Trade networks grow so interwoven that disruption in one region ripples outward to many others. Wealth accumulates unevenly, creating widening gaps between center and periphery. Beliefs harden. Institutions grow rigid, resistant to reform. The structure stands tall, yet tension hums beneath its surface. Complexity carries hidden weight. Every additional layer, economic, political, cultural, requires maintenance. Communication must flow, trust must endure, resources must circulate steadily. The more intricate a system becomes, the more vulnerable it grows to imbalance. Expansion feels like strength, yet it also increases exposure. When networks stretch thin, resilience diminishes. Seen this way, civilizations resemble ecosystems. They allow flourishing up to a point. Growth accelerates. Innovation compounds, influence expands. But imbalance, if uncorrected, accumulates pressure. Scarcity sharpens competition. Inequality fuels unrest. Environmental strain tightens margins. What once felt stable begins to wobble. In forests, periodic fire prevents decay from choking new growth. Flames clear underbrush, returning nutrients to soil. In oceans, predators maintain balance by limiting overpopulation. Disturbance, though destructive, preserves equilibrium in the long term. Stability without interruption leads to stagnation, and stagnation can make ecosystems fragile. The parallel emerges slowly. Human societies often experience their own disturbances after prolonged expansion. Conflict, famine, migration, climate shifts. These forces disrupt structures that have grown too rigid or too imbalanced. Collapse does not feel gentle. It carries loss, confusion, suffering. Yet from a structural perspective, it can also reset variables that had drifted beyond sustainable limits. This is not framed as comfort. It does not minimize tragedy. Instead, it suggests pattern. Earth does not promise endless upward motion. It tolerates flourishing, even encourages it, but only within thresholds. When imbalance deepens beyond resilience, correction follows. The form of that correction varies, sometimes gradual, sometimes abrupt, but the rhythm repeats. What if collapse is not punishment, but maintenance? The question unsettles because it reframes familiar narratives. Instead of seeing decline purely as failure, it becomes part of a wider cycle. Expansion gathers energy. Tension builds quietly. Breaks occur when stress surpasses capacity. Afterward, simpler systems emerge, lighter, more adaptive, though often stripped of previous complexity. The tone remains calm because the pattern is neither moral nor emotional. It appears systemic. Earth does not intervene selectively. It allows strain to reveal fragility. It permits flourishing while balance holds, and withdraws stability when pressure exceeds containment. As night deepens over ancient ruins and modern skylines alike, the possibility lingers. Perhaps resets are not random misfortunes scattered through time. Perhaps they function as embedded safeguards within a larger structure, ensuring that no system grows indefinitely without recalibration. If that is so, another question waits beyond it. When civilizations fracture and reform, do they remember fully what came before? Or does each cycle begin again with partial blindness, relearning lessons under new conditions? Across continents and centuries, stories survive in fragments. An elder speaks of a great flood that covered the land. Another tradition remembers a golden age when knowledge was abundant and harmony prevailed, followed by corruption and ruin. In distant cultures that never touched, similar motifs echo: water rising, fire descending, cities swallowed, wisdom lost. The details vary, yet the pattern feels familiar, as if memory strains to recall something just beyond clarity. Oral traditions carry resilience, but they also blur with time. Names shift, dates dissolve, symbol replaces fact. After upheaval, literacy often declines. Libraries crumble or burn. Skilled artisans vanish, and techniques once commonplace become rare. Roads fall into disrepair. Aqueducts collapse. Generations grow up unaware of what once stood on the very ground they till. Amnesia follows disruption with quiet consistency. Even in the modern era, knowledge remains more fragile than it appears. Archives can vanish in a single war. Data can be erased by corruption or deliberate force. Digital systems, vast and efficient, depend on infrastructure that can falter. We assume preservation because memory feels permanent, yet history shows how swiftly continuity can fracture. When a civilization resets, survivors adapt to immediate needs. Agriculture returns to local scale. Craft replaces industry. Stories shrink to fit daily survival. Grand theories fade into rumor. Knowledge, once structured and recorded, disperses into fragments carried in memory and myth. The thought arises slowly, almost reluctantly. What if forgetting is not merely collateral damage, but structural feature? In a true trial, participants may not be allowed full awareness of prior attempts. If each era remembered clearly the mistakes and lessons of earlier cycles, behavior would grow scripted. Responses would be predictable, rehearsed, rather than authentic. Uncertainty forces genuine choice. Without complete memory, societies must confront pressures as if new. They test their character without guaranteed guidance from the past. The narration does not insist on this interpretation. It invites reflection. Images of burning manuscripts fade into the sight of dawn over newly settled land. Wooden homes rise where stone once towered. Fields are ploughed atop, buried foundations. Children play unaware of former empires beneath their feet. Humanity rebuilds repeatedly, often without full comprehension of what came before. Each era believes itself advanced, perhaps even unprecedented. And yet, the rhythm persists, innovation followed by strain. flourishing followed by fracture, rebuilding upon silence. How much of history has been forgotten, not by accident, but by necessity? The question lingers over the ruins and the new settlements alike. Progress may not resemble an endless ascent toward clarity. It may be closer to rehearsal, each cycle refining something intangible. Knowledge expands, contracts, re-emerges in altered form. Wisdom flickers, dims, and returns. If memory thins between epochs, perhaps that thinning preserves authenticity. Each generation must rediscover courage, cooperation, restraint. Each civilization must test its cohesion without relying entirely on inherited scripts. The haunting possibility settles gently. Humanity may not be climbing a staircase of steady improvement. It may be moving through cycles of rehearsal, refining response through repetition, even as memory fades between acts. And if entire civilizations move through such cycles, the next question becomes more intimate. Within these vast patterns of rise and reset, what does a single human life experience? Before there were empires, before languages formed and monuments rose, there was a single heartbeat. A newborn inhales for the first time, lungs opening like fragile sails. A clock somewhere in the room marks another second, indifferent and precise. In that quiet rhythm, breath and ticking, an entire life begins its measured descent through time. Against mountains that endure for millions of years and oceans that shift across ages, a human lifespan barely flickers. Decades pass with unsettling speed. Childhood blurs into memory. Faces age. Hands that once felt invincible tremble with time. No one carries clear recollection of what preceded birth. No one returns with confirmed memory of what follows death. Existence unfolds within a narrow corridor, bracketed by silence. Within that corridor, every decision must be made without full knowledge. Trust is offered without guarantees. Love is given without permanence. Work is pursued without certainty of result. Even the body that carries consciousness proves temporary, changing quietly each year without consultation. Vulnerability is not optional here. Emotional attachment forms bonds strong enough to bring joy, yet fragile enough to cause profound grief. To care is to risk loss. To hope is to invite disappointment. Yet without those risks, experience loses depth. Why does the most meaningful growth often happen in the shortest lives? Sometimes a single act of courage in a brief existence leaves impact long after monuments erode. A quiet choice to forgive reshapes generations. A parent's unseen sacrifice alters the course of a child's future. These moments rarely make headlines. They do not require grand stages. They unfold in kitchens, hospital rooms, empty streets, beneath dim lights. If Earth were structured as a trial, brevity would serve purpose. An unlimited lifespan might dilute urgency. With endless time, hesitation would carry little cost. But within a compressed span, choices matter sharply. Mortality sharpens awareness. The knowledge that days are finite presses weight into seemingly ordinary moments. Aging itself becomes teacher. Strength fades. Energy shifts. Perspectives deepen. The awareness of limited time often awakens compassion and clarity. What once seemed urgent loses importance. What once seemed distant becomes immediate. Under the shadow of impermanence, values crystallize. The narrator lingers on ordinary scenes. A stranger pausing to help another lift heavy bags. A person returning a lost wallet anonymously. A difficult truth spoken gently. These gestures may appear small, but within a finite life they carry resonance. There is no endless tomorrow to correct every misstep. Choices accumulate. Life's constraints are intimate. The body tires, relationships change. Plans unravel. And still, humans continue to act as though their decisions matter deeply. They build, love, risk, strive, even knowing that time will eventually draw a boundary. The brevity of existence transforms experience into something concentrated. Moments become currency. Attention becomes precious. Each day offered is one less remaining. As night falls across cities and quiet homes alike, countless individuals consider their own finite path. Some question purpose. Some seek meaning in achievement. Others find it in connection. If the shortness of life intensifies every decision, then another question rises gently into view. How does uncertainty, about outcomes, about justice, about what lies beyond, shape the moral landscape within these fleeting years? For as long as language has existed, humanity has asked the same quiet questions. Why are we here? What happens when breath leaves the body? Why does suffering visit without warning? The questions rise in temples and laboratories, in hospital rooms and lonely bedrooms. They echo across centuries, carried by different words yet shaped by the same uncertainty. And still, definitive answers remain absent. No voice splits the sky to settle debate once and for all. No universal revelation appears on every horizon at once. Instead, silence persists. The universe responds with stars and gravity, with sunrise and decay, but not with explanation. Each generation inherits the mystery intact. That silence may feel like neglect. Yet, what if it serves a function? In any measured system, visible scoring alters behavior. When outcomes are displayed instantly and rewards are guaranteed, integrity becomes strategy. People respond not from conviction, but from calculation. They act to maximize visible gain. The moment scoring disappears, authenticity shifts. Earth reveals no cosmic scoreboard. Goodness does not always bring immediate success. Cruelty is not always punished swiftly. Generosity may pass unnoticed. Injustice may linger unresolved. Doubt remains woven into experience, forcing each individual to interpret the world without full clarity. Would goodness still exist if the reward were guaranteed? The possibility unfolds gently. Perhaps uncertainty is not flaw, but mechanism. Free will feels genuine, because certainty is withheld. Choice matters because outcomes are not transparently predetermined. The opacity surrounding ultimate meaning preserves sincerity. When no undeniable proof confirms design or accident, individuals must act according to inner alignment rather than external confirmation. The narrator avoids doctrines. No theological claims rise here. Only structural speculation. If Earth functions as trial, ambiguity would be essential. Without doubt, faith becomes sight. Without risk, courage dissolves. Without the possibility of unnoticed sacrifice, compassion loses depth. Images drift softly through ordinary crossroads. A business owner faced with profit, gained through deception, chooses honesty instead. A person wounded by betrayal resists revenge and extends restraint. A bystander steps forward when silence would be easier. These decisions occur without applause. They are not measured publicly. Their weight exists within private consciousness. If evaluation occurs at all, it would not require spectacle. It would unfold quietly through daily responses, through patterns of action formed over years. Integrity is rarely dramatic. It is persistent. It reveals itself through repetition, under uncertainty. Humanity continues asking ultimate questions because the silence invites them. Doubt presses inward, but so does curiosity. In the absence of guaranteed answers, individuals search, wrestle, reflect. The ambiguity forces confrontation with personal values. Perhaps certainty would diminish something essential. If everyone knew beyond doubt that a system observed and rewarded, virtue might become performance. In this obscured landscape, however, motives remain largely private. Choices reveal who someone is when no cosmic confirmation stands in view. The section settles into quiet stillness. The unanswered questions remain suspended like stars against dark sky. And within that silence, each person continues to act, to decide, to choose. If uncertainty protects authenticity, then a deeper inquiry waits ahead. Are we active participants moving through this structure by consent, or subjects immersed within it without full awareness? The view pulls back once more. Earth floats in darkness, a blue sphere turning slowly beneath distant stars. On its surface, billions of lives unfold at the same time. Somewhere, a child laughs. Somewhere else, a hospital room falls silent. In one city, a deal is sealed. Joy, loss, ambition, fear. Each moment contained within the thin atmosphere of a single world. From this height, no distinctions are visible. No halos mark kindness. No shadows reveal deceit. The planet carries it all without commentary. In controlled systems, observation alters behavior. In laboratories, particles behave differently when measured. The very act of looking changes the result. In daily life, humans respond to being watched as well. Cameras influence conduct. Public scrutiny sharpens caution. When surveillance is visible, spontaneity narrows, and yet humanity lives without confirmed awareness of cosmic observation. There is no unmistakable signal declaring that every thought is recorded, every action tallied. The sky does not glow with reminders of oversight. Silence persists. If no one appears to be watching, does that mean no one is? The question does not accuse, it lingers. If Earth were structured as a trial, constant visible oversight would distort the outcome. Participants aware of unbroken surveillance might perform rather than respond authentically. They might act strategically rather than sincerely. A true measure would require natural behavior, unfiltered by certainty of being observed. Perhaps the absence of visible observers is itself intentional. Threads from earlier reflections begin to align. Fine, tuned conditions that permit life, but do not guarantee comfort. A structure built on resistance and adaptation. Civilizations rising and fracturing in rhythmic cycles. All of it contained within a system that offers no definitive explanation of its purpose. Earth may function as a closed environment calibrated not for ease, but for response, not for display, but for development. A sphere where physical rules constrain behavior and uncertainty protects authenticity. A contained stage upon which consciousness navigates tension. Still, nothing confirms this interpretation. No external authority steps forward. The hypothesis remains quiet, woven through pattern rather than proclamation. Billions of humans continue their routines unaware of any larger structure beyond gravity and time. They plan for tomorrow. They regret yesterday. They choose under limited knowledge. If observation exists, it is concealed so completely that daily life feels unmonitored. The mind drifts toward a deeper possibility. Perhaps the question of observation extends beyond external watchers. Perhaps consciousness itself plays a role not yet understood. If awareness can shift particle behavior at microscopic scales, if perception interacts with reality more intimately than once believed, then the line between participant and observer may blur. The camera lingers on Earth one last time. A fragile world turning steadily, containing every story. Whether monitored or not, life continues, as though choice matters deeply. The section settles into stillness, but not closure. The question expands beyond this planet. If Earth resembles a contained trial, could similar worlds exist elsewhere? Or is this sphere uniquely calibrated for whatever purpose might lie beneath its silence? The camera drifts outward, leaving Earth behind as a small blue glow swallowed by blackness. Stars scatter across the darkness in quiet abundance. Some burn steady and ancient. Others flicker faintly, their light travelling for ages before reaching distant eyes. Around many of them, unseen planets circle in disciplined paths, warmed by their suns, wrapped perhaps in atmospheres of their own. The universe appears crowded. Galaxies cluster like islands in a vast ocean. Within each galaxy, billions of stars blaze. Around countless stars, planets orbit in patient loops. The scale defies imagination. Space feels almost excessive, as if life should have overflowed everywhere. And yet, there is silence. No confirmed signals cross the void with unmistakable clarity. No colossal structures appear etched against starlight. No visitors step forward publicly. Radio telescopes sweep the heavens and return mostly static. The sky glows, but it does not answer. If the universe is crowded with planets, why does it feel so empty? The question lingers among the stars. Statistically, it would seem likely that life has emerged elsewhere. Perhaps even intelligent life. With so many worlds, probability appears generous. Yet the observable universe offers no undeniable evidence of advanced civilizations announcing themselves. Some suggest that distance alone explains the quiet. The cosmos is vast beyond comfort. Signals weaken. Travel is slow. But even across those distances, one might expect some trace, an unmistakable sign that others have risen to technological maturity. Instead, the silence persists. Perhaps advanced civilizations do not broadcast. Perhaps they learn quickly that exposure carries risk, or perhaps they pass through stages too brief to overlap, rising, flourishing, and fading before encountering one another. Another thought settles quietly. What if visibility itself is limited by design? In a world structured around trial, isolation would serve purpose. If participants compared results openly, Competition might replace authenticity. If direct interference occurred between societies at different stages, development could be distorted. An environment meant to measure adaptation would need containment. The stars burn brightly, but offer no instruction. Their light arrives without commentary. Each planet around them moves unseen, conducting its own quiet experiment. Earth listens, but hears no definitive reply. Loneliness, from one angle, feels unsettling. From another, it feels structured. A classroom does not typically allow its participants to see other simultaneous exams in progress. Interference would alter outcome. The vastness of space becomes both backdrop and boundary. It stretches outward, containing countless possibilities while maintaining separation. Civilizations, if they exist, may unfold in their own isolated corridors of time and distance. Maybe Earth's solitude is not abandonment. Maybe it is containment. The camera continues its slow glide through the stars. Cosmic dust glows faintly in suspension. Planets orbit without announcing themselves. The universe appears generous in scale, yet restrained in communication. If silence surrounds us so completely, the next thought sharpens almost naturally. What if civilizations elsewhere rise as ours has, and then disappear before their signals ever cross the vast dark between worlds? Across the silent expanse of space, countless worlds may have followed a familiar script. Simple chemistry gives way to living cells. Life diversifies, adapts, spreads. Eventually, on at least some of those planets, awareness awakens. Creatures begin to question their surroundings. Tools emerge. Language forms. Knowledge accumulates. Intelligence accelerates its own evolution. At first, the path feels triumphant. Fire is mastered. Agriculture stabilizes growth. Writing preserves memory. Machines multiply strength. Energy is drawn from buried sunlight and split from the heart of atoms. Each step expands power. Each discovery reshapes possibility. Yet advancement carries thresholds. A society that learns to harness vast energy must also learn restraint. A civilization that connects its populations through networks must maintain trust across distances. Growth amplifies both strength and vulnerability. The very tools that enable progress can hasten collapse if handled without balance. Self-destruction becomes conceivable at advanced stages. Resource extraction can outpace renewal. Environmental systems can be destabilized faster than they can recover. Internal divisions, once manageable, widen under the stress of complexity. Communication amplifies fear as easily as wisdom. Innovation outpaces moral integration. What if intelligence itself is the most dangerous test? The thought settles slowly. Power magnifies character. Technological capability exposes intention at scale. A tool in careful hands builds infrastructure. In reckless hands, it dismantles equilibrium. As societies grow more advanced, consequences grow more immediate. Perhaps many civilizations reach similar crossroads. They invent, connect, expand, and then confront the weight of their own capabilities. Some may fail the threshold, fragmenting before achieving stability. Others might pass through, learning to wield power without destroying the systems that sustain them. If Earth functions as a trial, these developmental thresholds could represent its core challenge. The early stages of survival shape resilience. The later stages of power test responsibility. Intelligence creates the possibility of self-awareness, but also of self-ruin. The tone remains measured. This is not a prediction of doom, but recognition of pattern. Humanity today stands amid transformative technologies. Energy grids span continents. Artificial intelligence accelerates decision making. Climate systems show strain. Political networks stretch across ideological fault lines. The scale of influence grows rapidly. Perhaps this moment is not destiny, but stage progression, a phase every advanced civilization must navigate. Mastery without annihilation, expansion without fragmentation, innovation aligned with restraint. Maybe most civilizations falter at this point. Their signals never reach the stars because they never pass the threshold. Or perhaps some succeed, transitioning into forms of existence, less visible to external observers. They may not vanish. They may simply move beyond detectable parameters. The stars offer no record of who has passed or failed. They remain silent. Humanity continues forward, uncertain of outcome. The weight of capability grows each year. Choices now influence not just nations, but planetary systems. The test, if there is one, seems less concerned with survival alone and more with stewardship under power. If civilizations rise towards such thresholds, and if passing them requires transformation, the next question begins to unfold. Does success change the nature of existence itself? Or does it reveal another level waiting beyond this one? The vastness of space recedes, and the focus narrows to something quieter, almost personal. If Earth functions as a developmental chamber, then its boundaries may not be final. The idea does not arrive with fanfare. It unfolds gently, like dawn spreading across a still horizon. Every structured system implies progression. Every threshold suggests movement beyond. In classrooms, examination leads to advancement. Students complete stages and move forward, often unaware of the full design until later reflection. In digital simulations, levels unlock when certain conditions are met. Obstacles overcome reveal new environments. In nature, metamorphosis dissolves one form to release another. The caterpillar does not vanish when it transforms, it changes state. If this world is a level, what lies beyond it? The question feels bold yet strangely natural. If Earth measures adaptation, empathy, cooperation, restraint, then what purpose would such measurement serve without progression? Trials that offer no advancement feel incomplete. Systems that refine ability tend to open further possibility. Death stands as the most obvious boundary in human experience. It appears absolute from within the system. Breath stops. The body cools. The narrative ends. Yet, across cultures and centuries, intuition has insisted that the end may conceal transition. Stories of ascent, return, and continuity persist even where doctrines differ. People sense that consciousness may not collapse entirely into silence. The documentary claims no proof. It does not elevate one tradition above another. It simply observes a recurring human intuition that existence might continue in altered form. If Earth is preparatory rather than permanent, then death could represent exit rather than erasure. Physical constraints dominate here. Gravity anchors, time compresses. Uncertainty clouds perception. These limits create tension necessary for growth. But perhaps completion alters those parameters. Graduation from one environment may release individuals into another, less bound by scarcity, less constrained by ignorance. Earth, then, would not be prison but passage. Not punishment, but preparation. A chamber where awareness encounters contrast sharply enough to sharpen itself. When contrast has refined what it can, the environment may no longer be required. Such ideas remain speculative, yet they carry structural symmetry. Development suggests progression. Refinement implies application beyond the initial field. The cycle of education rarely ends at examination. It moves forward. From orbit, Earth glows quietly in the darkness, oceans reflecting early sunlight. It appears fragile against the vast background of space, yet rich with life within its thin shell of atmosphere. A temporary classroom turning slowly beneath distant stars. Perhaps its beauty lies partly in impermanence. Its purpose may not be to house consciousness indefinitely, but to shape it within clear boundaries before those boundaries dissolve. The sunrise brightens along the curve of the planet. Cities awaken. Forests stir. Millions begin new days unaware of larger hypotheses surrounding their existence. If graduation exists beyond this sphere, the next inquiry draws closer to home. Are there moments, even now, where the curtain seems thinner, where the limits of this system briefly reveal something beyond? The stories rarely begin with grand claims. They begin with heartbeats faltering, with metal twisting on highways, with hospital monitors emitting steady tones before abruptly shifting. A person lies motionless, and yet later describes watching from above. Another recalls a tunnel of light, not as fantasy, but as memory. Time seemed to slow, fear dissolved into clarity. Something felt wider than the body. Why do so many people describe glimpsing something beyond when they nearly die? These accounts surface across cultures and eras. A soldier in the chaos of battle senses the world pause into silence. Before action resumes, a driver inches away from collision, experiences minutes unfolding within seconds. A patient revived from cardiac arrest speaks of overwhelming peace, as though briefly stepping outside the weight of gravity and breath. The narrator does not confirm or deny. He places these accounts gently alongside scientific insight. Neuroscience maps oxygen deprivation in the brain, chemical surges during trauma, electrical activity that may generate vivid imagery. There are explanations, partial, measurable, reasonable, and yet something lingers beyond simple closure. Many testimonies share surprising patterns despite cultural distance. Descriptions of detachment from the body, expanded perception, encounters with light, not blinding but enveloping, a sense of returning reluctantly, as if interruption occurred mid-transition. Skepticism remains grounded. Memory is fragile. The brain is capable of extraordinary constructions under stress. But even within scientific frameworks, researchers acknowledge that consciousness under extreme conditions is not fully understood. What if, under immense pressure, the boundaries of perception thin? If Earth functions as contained environment, one might expect its edges to hold firm. Yet extreme states, near death, profound trauma, intense meditation, often shift awareness dramatically. Individuals report clarity sharper than ordinary waking life. Some speak of reviewing entire experiences in compressed moments. Others claim intuitive insights that alter the course of their lives long after recovery. Stress alters perception, even in mundane contexts. Time stretches during accidents. Focus narrows in danger. The brain recalibrates priorities instantly. It is plausible that extreme crisis unlocks latent neurological capacities. But the possibility remains quietly speculative, that these moments are not merely internal distortions. If this world is layered, structured with boundaries that maintain immersion, perhaps intense pressure momentarily weakens the veil. A trial under stress might reveal glimpses of what lies beyond it. This does not convert anecdote into evidence. It suggests pattern worth observing. Human history carries records of altered states across spiritual traditions, across medical cases, across battlefield memoirs. The details differ. The themes overlap. Balanced between skepticism and wonder, the stories continue. A person awakens from crisis changed, not frightened, but transformed. Priorities shift. Compassion deepens. Fear of death lessens. It is as if a boundary was brushed, then restored. Reality feels solid in ordinary hours. Gravity presses downward. Time advances steadily. Yet in rare conditions, perception fractures. For a brief interval, something wider seems present. By the end of these accounts, the suspicion grows subtle, but persistent. Perhaps reality is not as sealed as it appears during routine days. Perhaps its borders are stable, but not impenetrable. If perception can shift so dramatically under extreme states, then another possibility begins to form. Does the fabric of reality itself contain deeper structures, rules that resemble programmable features waiting beneath the visible surface? Beneath the shifting experiences of crisis and perception lies something far more stable. Planets trace predictable paths. Light bends in measurable arcs. Apples fall at the same rate today as they did in forgotten centuries. The structure of the physical world seems governed by consistent rules, invisible yet unwavering. Mathematics maps those rules with unsettling precision. Equations, written on paper mirror movements, unfolding across galaxies. Constants remain steady across time and space. The same ratios apply whether describing the orbit of a distant planet or the vibration of a microscopic particle. Reality aligns with calculation in a way that feels less accidental and more architectural. What if physics is not just description, but instruction? The idea is offered gently, not as proof, but as analogy. In digital environments, worlds operate within predefined rule sets. Objects behave according to code. Gravity pulls downward because it has been programmed to do so. Boundaries exist whether the characters perceive them or not. The environment remains stable because its constraints are carefully maintained. The universe behaves similarly. Energy converts, but never vanishes. Momentum is preserved. Information cannot be destroyed entirely. At large scales, the world feels dependable. At smaller scales, however, something stranger emerges. Particles do not always settle into definite states until measured. Possibilities exist in suspension, collapsing into outcome when observed. Probability underlies certainty. This unpredictability does not break the system. It exists within its boundaries. Statistical behavior replaces fixed trajectories, allowing variation without chaos. The result is a universe, both reliable and dynamic. Stable enough for stars to burn steadily. Flexible enough for novelty to emerge. Information threads through matter. DNA stores instructions for life. Atoms carry quantized states that define chemical behavior. Even empty space contains fluctuations invisible to ordinary senses. The deeper physics probes, the more it encounters structure layered beneath perception. If Earth functions as controlled environment, physics would be its constraint engine. The rules would need to support continuity so that experience remains coherent. At the same time, unpredictability would be necessary to preserve freedom and discovery. A system entirely rigid would leave no room for adaptation. A system entirely chaotic would dissolve into incoherence. Instead, we inhabit something balanced. Stars ignite and fade according to stable processes. Weather shifts with probabilistic nuance. Conscious minds arise within the confines of chemistry, yet retain surprising degrees of agency. The audience is not asked to conclude that the universe is artificial. It may be entirely natural in origin, yet its behavior resembles governance. Rules shape outcome. Boundaries frame possibility. Energy behaves as though following instructions embedded deeply into existence. When examined closely, reality feels less random than orchestrated, yet not mechanical enough to eliminate surprise. That combination, order and openness, keeps the system alive. It allows civilizations to rise and choices to matter. If rules govern experience so tightly, then another variable becomes essential. Within constraint, what remains free? If physics defines boundaries, where does decision reside? The next inquiry moves toward that question, toward the element that makes any trial meaningful, the tension between limitation and choice. Gravity holds every body close to the ground. Time moves forward without pause. Cells age, memories blur, knowledge remains partial. From the moment of birth, constraints surround the human experience. Physics defines motion. Biology shapes temperament. Culture frames belief. The structure seems tight. If everything is constrained, why do our choices still feel real? Genetics influence impulse. Environment narrows or expands opportunity. Early experiences leave marks that shape reaction. No individual begins from a blank slate. And yet, within these conditions, something unsettled persists. People act against instinct. They refuse profitable lies. They protect strangers at personal risk. They endure hardship rather than betray conviction. The tension between determinism and choice is subtle but constant. Biology may predispose aggression, yet restraint is still possible. Circumstance may reward selfishness, yet generosity still appears. History offers countless examples of individuals choosing paths that contradict advantage or even survival. Something in the human experience resists reduction to predictable outcome. In controlled environments, variables are set carefully. Conditions shape possibilities, but response remains open. That openness creates meaning. Without it, outcomes would be mechanical. Earth does not provide unlimited freedom. No one chooses their birthplace, body, or initial conditions. Yet, within given parameters, decisions ripple outward in ways that alter relationships, societies, even history. The world offers neither perfect clarity nor complete chaos. It provides enough uncertainty to make commitment genuine, enough limitation to make effort meaningful. Boundaries outline the field. Within them, movement remains possible. Threads from earlier reflections converge here. Fine-tuned physical laws establish stable parameters. Struggle builds resilience through tension. Civilizations cycle through growth and recalibration. Cosmic silence preserves isolation. Moments of altered perception hint at deeper layers. All of it unfolds within a framework that balances constraint with openness. The system does not appear designed to trap. It appears calibrated to evaluate response under pressure. Tests do not require unlimited freedom. They require meaningful choice within set boundaries. A question with no constraints carries no weight. A challenge without stakes teaches little. Each day offers subtle trials. Speak honestly or conceal truth. Extend compassion or retreat inward. Risk vulnerability or protect comfort. These decisions may seem small, but within finite lifespans they accumulate. Under the night sky, a person stands alone. Stars scatter above in silent distance. There is no visible observer, no illuminated scoreboard announcing success or failure. The universe does not applaud restraint or condemn cruelty in obvious language, and yet choice persists. If the framework surrounding existence constrains nearly everything, perhaps that narrow corridor of agency is precisely what matters. Within gravity and time, within uncertainty and silence, response remains unscripted. The chapter settles into quiet calm. The possibility that Earth functions as evaluative structure has been explored from many angles. But before accepting such a conclusion, doubt must be welcomed openly. The next chapter will turn towards skepticism, examining whether this framework holds under scrutiny or dissolves under the weight of reason. The tone shifts. The camera leaves distant galaxies and ancient ruins behind and settles in quieter rooms. Laboratories lit by steady white light, observatories humming softly. Libraries where shelves hold centuries of patient thought. Here, speculation is not dismissed, but disciplined. Here, wonder is measured carefully, against evidence. Coincidence can look like intention when viewed through a pattern, seeking mind. The universe appears finely balanced. Constants hold steady. Conditions allow life to flourish on a narrow band of possibility. But science offers another interpretation. Physical constants may not have been selected at all. They may simply be the way this particular universe functions. If they were different, observers capable of questioning them would never arise. Survivorship bias becomes central to this perspective. Among countless planets scattered across galaxies, most likely remain barren. Some may host simple chemistry that never awakens into awareness. Many environments fail quietly, unnoticed. Only rare worlds with compatible conditions sustain beings capable of reflection. Those beings inevitably find themselves on one of the few planets that worked. Are we mistaking survival for significance? It is possible that Earth feels tuned, not because it was deliberately calibrated, but because it is one successful outcome among vast numbers of unobserved failures. We cannot stand on planets where gravity crushes life instantly, or where atmospheres strip biology apart. We exist only where survival was possible. From within that narrow band, the alignment feels profound. Science does not require hidden architects to explain complexity. Evolution operates without foresight or intention. Small variations accumulate across generations. Natural selection preserves traits suited to environment and discards those that fail. Given enough time, extraordinary intricacy emerges through incremental adjustment. Eyes did not appear fully formed. Wings did not arise in a single leap. Each adaptation built upon previous structure, shaped by pressure and constraint. Complexity becomes inevitable under selection, not because it was planned, but because survival rewards refinement. Even the apparent fine balance of physical laws may not imply design. Some cosmological theories suggest multiple possible universes with varying parameters. In such a landscape, most configurations would be lifeless. A few would support structure and awareness. Observers would inevitably find themselves in the rare compatible domain. The mind inclined toward narrative may interpret rarity as purpose. This perspective demands intellectual humility. It asks whether our sense of calibration reflects deeper meaning, or simply statistical filtering. If billions of environments failed silently, leaving only a handful where consciousness could emerge, the appearance of design becomes less mysterious. The possibility does not eliminate wonder, it reframes it. Earth's suitability for life may be extraordinary, without being intentional. Complexity may arise from process, rather than plan. Silence in the stars may reflect vast distances rather than containment. The section does not settle the debate, it balances the scale. For every pattern that suggests structure, there exists a natural explanation rooted in physics and probability. If natural processes can account for Earth's stability and life's complexity, another challenge emerges. Even if structure does not require design, how do we reconcile the intensity of suffering within that structure? Could a trial framework withstand the weight of unnecessary pain? The tone grows quieter now. No galaxies, no equations. Only images that feel uncomfortably close. Cities reduced to rubble. Fields cracked by drought. Hospitals filled beyond capacity. A single person sitting alone after irreversible loss. If Earth was structured as a trial, the question sharpens painfully. If this world is a test, why is the difficulty sometimes unbearable? A fair examination implies proportion. The challenge should stretch capacity, not shatter it, beyond repair. Yet history offers examples that feel indiscriminate. Entire populations, erased by famine. Children caught in wars they did not create. Species extinguished without warning. Earthquakes that crush the innocent alongside the corrupt. Suffering that appears neither targeted nor measured. The objection is powerful. A refining system ought to distinguish carefully between necessary pressure and unnecessary harm. But reality does not always seem calibrated with such precision. Pain often arrives without warning, without visible lesson attached. Random illness interrupts stable lives. Accidents claim the careful and reckless alike. One response is structural rather than moral. In natural systems, adversity reveals resilience. Stress strengthens muscle, but too much strain tears it. Fire clears undergrowth, but uncontained flames devastate entire forests. In ecosystems, disturbance maintains balance up to a point. Beyond that point, collapse follows. If Earth operates through impersonal physical laws, then those laws may produce extremes without intention. Tectonic plates shift without moral awareness. Viruses evolve without discrimination. Evolution shapes life through competition and scarcity, but the process can appear ruthless when viewed from the human scale. Perhaps suffering reflects randomness rather than design. If the system is not finely controlled, then disproportionate pain becomes tragic evidence of indifference rather than deliberate trial. In this view, Earth is not a testing chamber, but a dynamic environment where chance plays heavy role. And yet, even within catastrophe, another pattern emerges. Crisis often reveals unexpected compassion. In disaster zones, strangers risk their lives for others. In famine, communities share dwindling resources. In war, acts of mercy appear amid brutality. Suffering exposes cruelty, but it also exposes empathy with startling clarity. It is possible that extreme adversity magnifies moral contrast. Under ordinary conditions, character can remain dormant. Under pressure, choices intensify. Fear either narrows compassion or expands it. Loss either hardens hearts or softens them. The tension refuses easy resolution. Excess suffering challenges the idea of careful calibration. Random devastation resists interpretation as measured evaluation. At the same time, human response to suffering often reveals depth that comfort rarely touches. The audience remains suspended between contradiction and coherence. If Earth is deliberate, its severity strains understanding. If Earth is accidental, the persistence of moral growth within chaos remains equally curious. There is no conclusion offered here, only recognition of complexity. Pain cannot be romanticized into lesson too quickly. It must be acknowledged fully. If suffering complicates the trial hypothesis, another possibility waits beyond it. Perhaps meaning itself is not embedded in the structure at all. Perhaps it is projected outward by human minds seeking order in indifferent space. The camera turns inward now, away from stars and ruins, toward the quiet machinery behind the eyes. The human brain is not a passive recorder. It searches. It links fragments. It fills gaps. They saw hunters, beasts, stories traced across darkness. Constellations emerged not from the stars themselves, but from minds weaving connections. We are natural pattern seekers. This tendency has served survival well. Recognizing shapes in tall grass meant detecting predators. Noticing shifts in seasons meant preparing for winter. The mind evolved to connect dots quickly, often before complete information was available. Accuracy increased survival. But so did speed, even at the cost of occasional error. Randomness feels unsettling. Unpredictable events challenge control. When something painful occurs, the mind strains to assign cause. Intention, even negative intention, can feel more stable than chaos. A world guided by purpose is easier to navigate emotionally than one ruled by indifference. Are we discovering purpose? or inventing it to survive. It is possible that the idea of Earth as trial arises, not from external design, but from internal need. Faced with suffering, uncertainty, and mortality, humans may construct frameworks that restore coherence. If hardship becomes examination, then it acquires meaning. If life is stage rather than accident, then even loss can be placed within narrative arc. Psychology shows that humans prefer coherent stories to fragmented data. Confirmation bias nudges us toward evidence that supports existing beliefs. Agency detection encourages us to see intention, even in ambiguous movements. The mind is comfortable attributing structure where none may exist. Yet acknowledging bias does not automatically dissolve every pattern into illusion. Pattern seeking can mislead, but it can also reveal genuine structure. Scientific discovery itself relies on noticing regularities. Mathematics emerges from recognizing order in apparent complexity. The same brain that invents constellations also uncovers gravity. To recognize cognitive tendencies is not to conclude that all perceived purpose is projection. It simply calls for humility. The hypothesis of Earth as trial may resonate, because it aligns with deep human instincts. But resonance does not prove falsehood, nor does it confirm truth. The tension tightens gently. Belief and skepticism sit side by side. One suggests hidden architecture. The other warns against self-created narrative. Both arise from the same consciousness, seeking clarity in uncertain terrain. Perhaps the mind constructs frameworks as survival strategy. Or perhaps it recognizes echoes of structure, because structure genuinely exists. Distinguishing between projection and perception remains challenging. The chapter ends without verdict. The viewer is left in thoughtful equilibrium, aware of cognitive filters, yet still confronted by persistent patterns in history, physics, and experience. If the idea of purpose could emerge from internal psychology alone, the next inquiry widens again. Across centuries, has humanity's moral trajectory moved randomly? Or does it suggest direction that transcends individual bias? Long before cities pierced the horizon, or laws were written in ink, humanity lived close to the edge of survival. Shelter meant protection from cold and predators. Food determined whether a season would end in strength or hunger. Loyalty centered on tribe because tribe meant safety. Moral concern rarely extended beyond familiar faces. Compassion was intimate, necessary, but limited by proximity. Over time, something shifted. Agriculture allowed stability. Settlements became towns, and towns evolved into cities. As societies grew larger, rules became necessary. Agreements replaced instinct alone. Legal systems emerged, first crude, then refined. Codes were etched into stone, not merely to punish, but to standardize fairness within expanding groups. The circle of responsibility widened. Gradually, conscience stretched beyond bloodline. Trade connected distant cultures. Ideas crossed borders once thought impassable. Philosophies appeared proposing that justice applied not only to kin, but to strangers, not only to the strong, but to the vulnerable. Across eras, individuals began challenging entrenched hierarchies, arguing that dignity might belong to all. Why does humanity, despite setbacks, keep reaching toward wider compassion? Progress has never been smooth. History carries long chapters of brutality, oppression, and regression. Hard-won freedoms have been reversed. Rights granted have been withdrawn. Violence has often silenced reform. Yet, when viewed across centuries rather than years, a subtle pattern emerges. Practices once accepted as normal have been questioned, then condemned. Injustices that endured for generations have eventually been dismantled. The recognition of equality did not arrive suddenly. It expanded unevenly, contested fiercely. But the general arc suggests an enlarging moral horizon. Slavery abolished where it once seemed permanent. Legal protections extended to groups long excluded. Human rights articulated not as privileges of the powerful, but as claims inherent to personhood. This evolution does not erase cruelty from the present, nor does it guarantee continued ascent. Yet something within human societies appears restless with narrow definitions of belonging. Ideas of fairness tend to grow more inclusive over time, even when resistance remains strong. If Earth were structured as trial, perhaps evaluation extends beyond individual choices. Perhaps collective moral capacity forms part of the measure. Growth might be tracked not only through personal integrity, but through social transformation. Do civilizations learn from harm inflicted? Do they widen empathy with experience? Such a possibility does not romanticize history. Progress often arrives after intense struggle. Voices demanding justice are frequently resisted. But persistence itself is notable. Across continents and generations, people continue to argue for expanded compassion, even when doing so carries cost. Humanity's story, viewed from distance, reveals brutality intertwined with reform. Both impulses remain present. The tension between them shapes eras. As dusk falls over ancient landscapes, once defined by survival alone, and modern cities glow with ideas of universal rights, the question lingers gently in the air. If moral awareness appears to expand despite resistance, what forces accelerate that growth? And what conditions bring it sharply into focus? History often moves quietly, until it doesn't. There are moments when pressure builds beneath the surface of societies, unnoticed by most, until rupture arrives. War redraws borders. Pandemics sweep through cities. Environmental disasters expose fragilities long ignored. In those moments, destruction dominates the horizon. Systems strain. Certainties fracture. Loss becomes immediate and undeniable. And yet, when the smoke clears, something unexpected sometimes follows. After devastating wars, new institutions have emerged designed to prevent repetition. Rights, once debated, become codified in law. Charters are signed, agreements forged from exhaustion as much as hope. Medical knowledge accelerates after outbreaks, reveal urgent gaps. Public health systems strengthen where once they were neglected. Environmental crises prompt reconsideration of resource use and stewardship. Do our greatest breakthroughs only arrive after we almost collapse? The pattern is not clean nor universal, but it appears frequently enough to demand attention. Crisis compresses time. Decisions that once felt optional become unavoidable. Suffering reshapes priorities. What was dismissed as distant becomes immediate. Cooperation once resisted becomes necessary. Under pressure, societies confront consequences. They re-evaluate assumptions. Structures built during comfort are tested during hardship. Some fail entirely. Others adapt, reorganize, and emerge altered. Crisis is not inherently transformative. It can deepen division as easily as unity. It can entrench fear rather than inspire reform. But it creates clarity. Illusions dissolve when systems fracture. Weaknesses become visible. In that visibility lies opportunity. If Earth functions as trial on a collective scale, repeated exposure to challenge may refine judgment gradually. Humanity does not appear to learn quickly. Mistakes repeat across generations. Conflicts echo earlier disputes. Yet over longer arcs, incremental adjustments accumulate. Practices once normalized begin to feel unacceptable. Solutions once unthinkable become necessary. Learning is uneven. Some societies adapt and expand moral concern after catastrophe. Others double down on old patterns. Growth is not automatic, nor guaranteed. But the potential for recalibration seems tied to moments of intense strain. The present era carries its own pressures. Technological acceleration, climate instability, global interconnection, amplifying both cooperation and conflict. These challenges feel large because they are. The stakes extend beyond borders, beyond single nations. Modern crises may represent another inflection point, testing whether collective awareness has matured sufficiently to respond constructively. The outcome is uncertain. There is no visible guarantee of improvement. The possibility remains subtle but persistent. Pressure functions as catalyst. It forces re-evaluation. It tests cohesion. It reveals whether lessons from previous cycles have been integrated. Humanity may learn slowly, but it appears capable of learning. As night settles over cities shaped by past reforms born of hardship, a final question begins to surface. If repeated crisis refines moral capacity, what role does awareness itself play? Does recognizing the pattern signal that a threshold approaches once again? For most of history, humans were isolated by geography and limited by information. A village understood its own customs, a kingdom its own borders. Knowledge moved slowly, carried by foot or sail. Questions about existence were asked in scattered places, rarely shared beyond local circles. Awareness was intimate but fragmented. Now, something different unfolds. Signals circle the globe in seconds. Billions of people carry access to more information than entire empires once possessed. Scientific instruments peer deep into cosmic background and microscopic structure alike. Philosophical debates, once confined to cloisters, now unfold in public spaces across continents. For the first time, humanity can reflect on its own trajectory collectively. This scale of self-awareness feels unprecedented. The question emerges naturally: does recognizing possible structure alter participation? In many forms of testing, awareness changes behavior. Once a challenge is understood, strategy evolves. Motivation sharpens. Participants begin to observe not only tasks, but themselves within the system. Yet, in most trials, full awareness arrives gradually. Early stages focus on survival and basic understanding. Later stages require reflection and integration. Perhaps earlier civilizations, preoccupied with immediate pressures, were not positioned to contemplate existence at planetary scale. Today, entire populations debate the nature of consciousness, simulation, design, and destiny in real time. What if asking whether this is a trial is part of passing it? The thought lands quietly but carries weight. Awareness might not distort the system if it emerges only after certain thresholds are crossed. Recognition of structure could represent maturity rather than interference. A child cannot meaningfully reflect on curriculum until a certain level of comprehension has formed. Similarly, humanity may have needed centuries of moral and technological development before turning inward collectively. The camera circles Earth once more. From orbit, cities glow like constellations mapped onto land. Forests breathe, oceans roll, communications pulse invisibly between continents. Within this web, countless minds engage in examination, not only of external world, but of purpose itself. Humanity stands at crossroads. It holds capacity for unprecedented destruction and unprecedented cooperation. It can extinguish ecosystems or preserve them. It can fracture under division or align under shared understanding. It can ignore existential questions or confront them openly. The possibility that Earth functions as evaluative environment no longer belongs to isolated mystics or speculative philosophers alone. It circulates within mainstream dialogue. Curiosity about structure is becoming common, not fringe. This shift does not conclude anything. It deepens tension. If recognition marks nearing completion of certain stages, the present era feels charged, not with spectacle, but with introspection. Something feels imminent, though not necessarily catastrophic. More like realization, gathering strength beneath surface events. No triumphant declarations follow. No cosmic confirmation interrupts the quiet. Only the sense that awareness itself may be significant. The ability to question purpose might indicate progression rather than confusion. As the planet turns beneath distant stars, a final thread begins to form. If humanity's growing self-awareness suggests movement toward threshold, perhaps the true variable refined within this system has always been consciousness itself. Before galaxies, before civilizations, before questions about purpose, there is a flicker in darkness. A single neuron fires. An electrical impulse leaps across a microscopic gap, passing from one cell to another. Billions of these signals surge through the brain every second, forming vast networks of communication too complex to visualize fully. And from this intricate storm of chemistry and charge, something astonishing appears. Awareness. Matter arranges itself into atoms. Atoms combine into molecules. Molecules organize into cells. Cells specialize and cluster into organs. Among them, the brain emerges, a structure of folded tissue, pulsing with electrical rhythm. Science can describe the firing patterns, the release of neurotransmitters, the synchronization of circuits. It can trace pathways that correspond to memory, language, emotion. Yet none of these descriptions fully explain the experience of being someone. How does lifeless matter wake up and realize it exists? The problem remains unsolved. Chemistry accounts for movement of ions across membranes. Physics explains energy transfer. Biology charts the growth of neural networks. But somewhere between mechanism and sensation lies a gap. How do electrical signals produce the taste of coffee, the ache of grief, the warmth of love? How does a pattern of neural activity become the private sense of self? The narrator speaks with quiet reverence because the mystery resists reduction. Consciousness feels immediate and undeniable. It is the lens through which every perception arrives. Without it, pain is just chemical reaction. Joy is only neurotransmitter exchange. Growth would occur, perhaps, but without anyone to experience it. If Earth were structured as trial, consciousness would be its essential instrument. Without awareness, suffering carries no lesson. Without perception, courage has no witness. A system designed to measure character would require an inner life capable of reflection. The test would not measure action alone, but intention behind action. Perhaps consciousness is not merely byproduct of matter's complexity. Perhaps matter provides the conditions through which awareness is refined. The brain might function less as creator and more as interface, a vessel allowing something intangible to move through physical experience. The camera lingers on human faces, eyes focused in thought, brows furrowed in doubt, expressions shifting between curiosity and fear. Each face contains interior worlds inaccessible to anyone else. Millions of private narratives unfolding simultaneously across the planet, unseen yet deeply real to those living them. Consciousness creates meaning from experience. It assigns value to events. It remembers, anticipates, questions. Without it, the universe would remain silent in a different way, not only without answers, but without inquiry. The possibility grows subtle but profound. Maybe the universe is not primarily shaping bodies, societies, or technologies. Maybe it is refining awareness itself. Matter may be medium rather than goal. As silence settles around this thought, another inquiry begins to surface. If consciousness stands at the center of this mystery, is it confined entirely to the brain, or does it extend beyond the boundaries we assume? The inquiry widens gently, as though the mind itself is stepping back from its own machinery. For decades, perhaps centuries, the dominant view has been clear. The brain creates consciousness. Neurons fire, networks synchronize, and from that complexity, awareness emerges. Damage the brain, and perception shifts. Alter chemistry, and mood changes. The link seems undeniable, but correlation is not origin. What if the brain does not create consciousness, but narrows it? Imagine a radio. Inside its casing, circuits process signals into music and speech. Damage the components, and the sound distorts. Yet the broadcast itself does not originate within the device. The radio receives and translates something already present in the surrounding field. The analogy is imperfect, but suggestive. Materialism proposes that mind arises from matter, arranged with sufficient complexity. Given enough interacting cells, subjective experience appears. This explanation has explanatory strength. It aligns with observable links between physical states and mental states. It preserves parsimony. Yet, alternative perspectives persist. Some thinkers propose that awareness may be embedded within reality itself, not as mystical substance, but as fundamental aspect, alongside space, time, and energy. In this view, matter does not produce consciousness. It shapes and channels it. Physical form constrains awareness into individual perspective, like light passing through prism becomes specific color. Modern physics, at its edges, confronts its own strangeness. Particles behave like waves. Observation influences outcome. Space is not as solid as it seems. Reality dissolves into probabilities when examined closely. Meanwhile, subjective experience refuses complete translation into equations. Both science and introspection approach boundaries where intuition falters. The narrative does not choose sides. It lingers in tension. If awareness is product of matter, then death likely ends it. If awareness is more fundamental, then physical form may be temporary expression rather than origin. Symbolic imagery drifts quietly through the mind. Waves rise and fall on the surface of ocean, yet the water beneath remains continuous. Reflections shift depending on angle, though the light source persists. A prism splits white radiance into spectrum without exhausting its source. If awareness is fundamental, Earth as trial could function as filter. Consciousness might enter into limitation deliberately or structurally, experiencing contrast through embodiment. Constraint would create individuality. Time would create narrative. Mortality would create urgency. Such speculation does not demand belief. It invites contemplation. If the brain narrows awareness rather than generates it, then what we call self might be localized expression of something wider. The body becomes lens. The world becomes stage. The thought is destabilizing, but not reckless. It rests between neuroscience and philosophy, between skepticism and possibility. The question remains open. And if awareness predates physical form, then death would not necessarily erase it. It would represent transition of perspective, like shifting frequency beyond the range of current receiver. With that possibility lingering softly, the inquiry moves toward the boundary humanity fears most, the line where breath ceases and the unknown begins. Every story told on Earth carries the same ending. Breath slows. The body rests. The voice that once filled rooms falls silent. Across centuries and cultures, no experience has been more certain, and none more mysterious. Death arrives as boundary, as closing chapter, as the moment beyond which no confirmed report returns. If this world is temporary, what does death actually mean? Without dramatization, the question remains steady and clear. Mortality gives urgency to experience. Time feels precious because it runs out. Love feels weighty because it can be lost. Ambition sharpens because opportunity narrows. Death shapes priorities in ways comfort cannot. It compresses life into significance. Finite existence forces decisions. If days were endless, urgency would dissolve. Regret would lose force. Forgiveness could be postponed indefinitely. But with limit comes weight. Every choice becomes irreversible once time advances. And yet, alongside fear of extinction, humanity has carried an enduring intuition that awareness may not vanish entirely. This intuition appears in ancient burial rites, in whispered prayers, in philosophical reflections separated by oceans and millennia. It is not confined to one culture. It surfaces wherever humans contemplate the final horizon. Near-death accounts add texture to this intuition, though not proof. Sudden clarity at the edge of loss. A sense of expansion beyond bodily sensation. Reports of peace replacing fear. Science offers physiological explanations, yet the persistence of these themes across eras invites continued reflection. If Earth functions as structured environment, the concept of death may fit within its design differently than assumed. In trials, completion does not equal annihilation. It marks transition. A student leaves examination hall when finished. A character exits one stage and enters another. Ending one level does not erase existence. Within the system, it changes participation. This does not confirm survival beyond physical form. It reframes death as structural possibility rather than automatic oblivion. If awareness is fundamental, as earlier reflections suggested, then embodiment may be temporary interface. When the body ceases, awareness might shift perspective rather than disappear. The documentary does not assert certainty. It does not promise reunion or continuity in specific terms. It remains within possibility. If Earth operates as preparatory environment, death could serve as exit point. A doorway rather than collapse, the end of one mode of experience, not necessarily the end of experience itself. Fear remains understandable. Unknown transitions always unsettle. But if existence functions within larger framework, mortality may resemble phase change rather than final silence. The horizon at twilight holds this ambiguity. Light and darkness blur into one another, neither fully dominant. From distance, the edge between day and night appears gradual, not abrupt. The curtain closes slowly, shading into shadow, without revealing what lies beyond. It may be barrier, it may be threshold. As the image settles into quiet stillness, the inquiry prepares to return home. The final chapter will circle back to Earth itself, gathering the threads woven through fine tuning, struggle, collapse, consciousness, and silence, without forcing resolution where mystery may be essential. The camera returns to where this journey began. Earth turns slowly in the black expanse, blue and white against endless dark. Clouds spiral across oceans. Night lights flicker along continents. From this distance, the planet appears calm, self-contained, indifferent to speculation. No signs flash across the sky. No message writes itself in starlight. No voice interrupts the silence to explain why any of this exists. Despite centuries of philosophy, despite advances in physics and biology, despite stories of near-death visions and the long arc of moral evolution, Earth does not confirm its purpose. There is no unmistakable proof of design, no measurable evidence that life here functions as trial. The world remains materially consistent and existentially quiet. This absence could be read as refutation. If a system were deliberate, surely it would reveal itself. Surely clarity would replace doubt. Yet another possibility lingers. If Earth were truly a trial, would you expect it to admit it? A genuine evaluation cannot announce its criteria openly without changing the outcome. If participants knew with absolute certainty that every action was being recorded for final judgment, behavior would shift toward performance. Fear or reward would guide decision more than inner conviction. Ambiguity preserves authenticity. Throughout history, humans have acted morally without guarantee of recognition. They have chosen compassion in obscurity. They have resisted wrongdoing even when reward seemed absent. The silence surrounding ultimate purpose forces individuals to confront themselves rather than external confirmation. Perhaps the absence of undeniable proof does not weaken the hypothesis. Perhaps it is structurally necessary. Earth provides stable physical laws. It offers consistent cause and effect. It allows inquiry, doubt, belief, skepticism. But it does not resolve the final question. It leaves room for interpretation. That space between certainty and ignorance is where character reveals itself. Life unfolds without visible scoreboard. Success and failure are defined locally, socially, personally. There is no cosmic dashboard announcing progress. No direct feedback after each moral choice. People act not because they are certain they are observed, but because they choose according to inner alignment. This quiet persistence feels significant. Billions continue to search for meaning, to care for others, to wrestle with conscience, without confirmed instruction from the universe. The silence has endured through empires and revolutions, through scientific revolutions and technological leaps. It has not been broken by satellite or telescope. It has not been solved by equation or ritual. The tone now is reflective, almost tender. Closure approaches, but not conclusion. The absence of confirmation remains intact, like the dark space between stars. If silence protects authenticity, then the next question becomes practical rather than speculative. How does awareness of this possibility, of living within unconfirmed structure, shape the way ordinary days are lived? The perspective lowers from orbit to street level. A door is held open for someone carrying too much. A driver pauses to let another merge. A parent kneels to listen carefully to a child's small fear. None of these gestures alter the rotation of the planet. None shift the stars. Yet they ripple quietly through lives. Whether Earth is trial or accident, actions still carry consequence. If no one guarantees meaning, does that make your choices less important, or more? The question reframes everything. If existence is structured as evaluation, then integrity matters because it may be measured beyond what is visible. If existence is random, then integrity matters because it shapes the only life we are certain to experience. In both possibilities, response remains central. Small decisions accumulate. A patient answer diffuses anger. A selfish impulse indulged once may echo into habit. A compassionate impulse repeated may become character. The world feels vast and indifferent from space, but intimate and responsive at human scale. Meaning does not have to arrive from beyond to alter behavior. It can emerge through participation. Helping someone does not require proof of cosmic reward. It changes the atmosphere immediately. Trust strengthens relationships. Honesty sustains cooperation. Kindness softens conflict. The trial hypothesis does not demand belief to influence conduct. It invites responsibility. It suggests that even if ultimate structure remains uncertain, living with awareness of possible significance enriches choice rather than restricting it. Earth remains ambiguous. No announcement clarifies design or accident. Yet people continue making decisions every hour. that either widen or narrow empathy. Some choose self-interest at cost of others. Some choose restraint when anger tempts. The difference shapes families, communities, histories. In quiet rooms and busy streets, human beings confront small crossroads daily. No cosmic sign marks the correct path. Only conscience and consequence guide the way forward. Awareness of uncertainty may even heighten sincerity. Acting with integrity, despite doubt, carries weight that certainty might dilute. This is not preaching. It is observation. Societies function better when trust exists. Individuals sleep easier when actions align with values. Even without confirmed evaluation, moral consistency produces tangible effects. If Earth is evaluative system, then daily life becomes meaningful training ground. If Earth is simply natural outcome of physics and probability, daily life remains meaningful because it is the only arena available. Either way, participation matters. The camera lingers on ordinary scenes, laughter shared at kitchen tables, strangers volunteering time, someone choosing forgiveness instead of retaliation. These moments do not solve existential questions. They express response within uncertainty. Perhaps that is enough. The horizon stretches beyond this planet, beyond its cycles and speculations. The final reflection will not close the mystery, but widen it further, carrying the question beyond Earth itself into the larger silence that surrounds all worlds. Earth has existed for billions of years. Continents have formed and fractured. Oceans have risen and receded. Entire species have appeared, flourished, and vanished without trace. Long before humans asked questions about meaning, the planet turned in quiet indifference beneath a younger sun. One day, it will not. Stars exhaust their fuel. They swell, collapse, scatter their elements into the dark. Galaxies drift farther apart. Even matter shifts, state across unimaginable spans of time. Impermanence defines the physical universe. Nothing material remains unchanged forever. If Earth is a trial, it is temporary. If Earth is accidental, it is still temporary. The distinction may not lie in duration, but in interpretation. The film has circled through fine-tuned physics, fragile civilizations, silent stars, and the mystery of consciousness. It has entertained skepticism and defended doubt. It has explored suffering without dismissing it, and hope without romanticizing it. And yet, no undeniable answer has emerged. What if Earth was designed as a trial, not a home? The question remains suspended, neither confirmed nor denied. The absence of conclusion feels intentional. A final declaration would narrow the field too quickly. Certainty would close the door that curiosity has kept open. Perhaps the purpose of this world, if there is one, is not hidden in distant nebulae or encrypted in ancient ruins. Perhaps it unfolds in quieter places, in the split second when anger yields to restraint, in the choice to care when indifference would be easier, in the courage to act ethically without guarantee of recognition. Maybe the structure, if it exists, operates not through spectacle, but through awareness. What if the reason you're asking this question is the reason you're here? The thought lands gently, but alters perspective if existence prompts self-reflection, if consciousness awakens to contemplate its own conditions. Perhaps inquiry itself is part of the design. The search may matter as much as any answer found. The camera drifts away from Earth one final time. The blue sphere diminishes against layered darkness. Stars remain silent. No inscription appears across the void. No voice confirms speculation. But the silence does not feel empty. It feels textured, holding possibility without imposing direction. The question outlives the planet because it resides not in stone or atmosphere, but in awareness itself. Whether Earth is trial or coincidence, consciousness has emerged here capable of wondering, capable of examining its own existence, capable of reshaping behavior in light of uncertainty. The narrative does not close with verdict. It widens into open stillness. The responsibility shifts outward beyond screen and frame into the life of the viewer. Somewhere beneath the same quiet stars, another decision will be made. Another act of compassion will occur. Another question will surface. And perhaps, in that continued wondering, the mechanism, whatever it may be, keeps turning.